Well, you know, some people say that life is a highway, but if it is, there are a lot of potholes and detours that we have to deal with. Matt and Cyndy Miklasz have faced some major obstacles along their path, but God has helped them find joy for the journey. Matt and Cyndy, welcome to Real Life.
It's a joy to be here. Thank you.
From Minnesota.
Indeed.
Home of the Timberwolves and the Vikings and
correct.
whatever other, I don't know what the baseball team is there, but
Twins.
The Twins, okay,
Yes.
but I heard that you love the Chicago areas.
Cubs,
Cubbies.
Bulls, Bears,
Oh, boy.
yeah, that's me.
He's Chicago, I'm Wisconsin. Somehow we're in the middle of Minnesota now.
Well, you know, I'm so glad to see a smile on your face because you guys have gone through some major obstacles. And I told everybody this is going to be rated R today for real. You know, so I mean, it's something that I think it's so important in the church and the body of Christ that we're able to be real. So can you take a minute and just share with us what you're in right now and what you guys have been going through?
Sure. Right now, I'm battling leukemia, a rare form of leukemia that I've had for several years. And we also just got through the season of the colorectal cancer, which metastasized to my lung, and I had to remove most of my left lung. And so we've gone through several years, probably last 6, packed tight of just challenge after challenge after challenge of the treatments and radiation and all that goes with that. Right now, again, the real battle seems to be with leukemia and some of the challenges, the day-to-day, the fatigue and the quick infections and all that fun stuff that we deal with right now in the immediacy. We've also had, when our son was born, Benjamin, we faced, probably for the first time in our marriage, a real challenge. And maybe I'll let Cyndy share a little more about Ben's situation.
Ben is our second child, our first son, and regular pregnancy, everything went well, but when he was born, just after he was born and he was taken to the nursery, they came back and said there's some problem. And to shorten it up, basically he had one of his 4 heart valves was closed. And so he had to be flown helicoptered from that smaller hospital. So he left without us. We had to leave the hospital without a new baby, which is just devastating. He had open heart surgery then at 5 days old to open that heart valve, and it was functioning. But as he grew, that valve didn't keep up with him, and so he had a second open heart surgery to get an artificial heart valve, and then a third to get an adult-sized artificial heart valve. And, you know, as a baby, you know, that was really hard to go through, you know, with him and not knowing, you know, if we, you know, he was going to be able to make it home with us or not. And then when he was 9, after he had the surgery when he was 9 years old, and then he had to have a third one, he could remember what it was like as 9. And so he was really, you know, filled with dread and worry and was affecting his schoolwork. And so to get him through that, but overall, he's a healthy kid. He climbs trees and, you know, rides horses and is always scratched up or something. So it's, really been a blessing to have him,
We found when we wrote the book, a lot of the lessons we're learning now, we kind of went back a little bit to the time with Benjamin, and we could see, draw upon those things we learned then to even carry over into now.
Well, you know, you guys are pastoring a church, you're
Correct.
tithing, you're giving, you're doing all the things you need to do, and you guys are going through all these trials and tribulations. Have you ever asked God why?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Lots.
Correct. Yes, I have. In times of prayer, the question of why also carries with the idea of the perspective of a human perspective of what the future holds. Lord, why would you allow this when my boys are going to graduate in a year? I want to see them graduate. You know, I want to walk my daughters down the aisle. Why would you take that from me? Because in the moments it seems like I don't even know if I'm going to make the year. And praise God, 2 weeks ago saw our boys graduate.
Yep.
Oh,
and
praise
so
God.
so I remember those type of prayers a couple years ago, and just feeling like I want to hang on till I can see that.
We don't want the daughters to marry anytime soon. That's
Right.
a couple years down the road at least.
Right, exactly. And so those why prayers are definitely there. And then, you know, the love of my life, I mean, would you take that away? You know, so, you know, those why prayers for sure became, and I say became because they weren't always, a part of my prayer life.
And I just want to ask you, Cyndy, the hardships that you've had to walk through early on in your marriage with your son and now what you're walking through with your husband, what has that been like for you as a wife and a mother and, carrying on in the midst of this?
Well, we found, even from when Benjamin was little in the hospital, just to have a sense of humor. Matt's family likes to say, we laugh so we don't cry. And as Benjamin was older, then you can't take it too seriously. You can't, scare the kids, So to really pray, God, take care of him. And, we can pray that obviously with him, but, not to share all the medical stuff, with a 9-year-old or a 13-year-old. And even when Matt's been in the hospital too, I mean, we go, out of the way just, to pray and realize what's going on, but to brighten the mood. Things from home, Matt's family, sisters are usually there. We usually find something to joke about. It's like I said, that's, kind of how we go about it.
You experience the proverb, laughter is good medicine.
Yeah.
And you read it, you're like, yeah, it's good. But then when you get in a hard time and you're like, yeah, it really is. Laughter is a real blessing.
It really is. And one of the things that is astounding to me, I don't know if you all heard in your homes what he said: colorectal cancer, lost half of your lung, battled with a son, and now you're battling with leukemia again. Yeah. How do you deal with it every day? From the both of you, I'd like to hear from your perspective how it affects you, but how do you deal with it right now? I mean, of course, people a lot of times share the testimony from the standpoint of, well, I came out of it and praise God. You're still in it. How do you make it from day to day?
The leukemia is an ongoing thing. I mean, it's not that familiar with all the kinds, but Matt's particular type, there is no cure for it. It just keeps going. You have to be careful. You have to, really watch, how much you're around people and sometimes sick people, which, affects Matt, what he does as a job. It affects some of how we handle things as a family. So that, we, obviously God could change that. That could,
Amen.
But as it is now, it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. I mentioned it obviously in the book, and I can't really emphasize it enough. The challenge each day is to wake up and say, will I orient this day around my cancer, leukemia?
That's good. Or
will I orient it around Jesus Christ and ask the question regularly, which daily, how can I glorify you today, Jesus? How can I glorify you in the challenges? And whatever comes my way, every conversation I recognize even more so now has the potential to hopefully really encourage and bring people hope. Because it just seems when, the people realize, hey, you got cancer, you got leukemia, and all of a sudden now they're a little more comfortable talking to you about their challenges. Because all of a sudden now they're not alone. And so you realize that God builds bridges to conversations that might not have been there before. That's part of his wisdom, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so each day becomes an opportunity for me, if I can just stay focused and spend that time with him and say, Lord, would the strength for my intimacy with you cause me today to make sure I orient everything around you and your glory.
Mm-hmm. And even the days in the hospital, he's each nurse that comes in, and Matt's really good about this. What's your name? What's your background? If they have, sometimes a necklace with a cross or something, that kind of opens up the conversation to, oh, do you go to church here? And that kind of astounds me. But that's just part of Matt's great attitude. That even, like I said, on the days when he's in the hospital and seemingly can't do something, he's building bridges and brightening their days.
Wow.
What I wanted to ask the two of you is, Matt, I love how you said your perspective about everything is surrounding around Jesus. So my question for both of you as, married couple, how does that mindset of, I'm focusing everything on Jesus, how does that permeate and flow down into your marriage and into your family?
I would venture to say a lot of my life, I don't tend to think of the way I would respond to Cyndy necessarily in the moment of, would this response glorify God? We tend to think of what would make somebody happy. But I've realized my goal as a husband is not really to make Cyndy happy, it's that she'd be healthy. It's a different question sometimes. And because to try to strive for her to be healthy, that's God honoring.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's saying something that maybe is a little uncomfortable, or maybe talking about things that we wouldn't prefer to. And certainly encouraging her, heaping encouragement and trying to remind her that we're not walking alone right now. We're together, and we have Christ, who's the one who's holding us together. And so that's that sense of how can I honor God, even just in our conversations. What would this word in this moment help her? And so while I don't always remember that, it's something on my mind to try to do that.
Well, I don't know. That was how do I top that? But and obviously, I mean, it's easier to see that in parenting. You know, you don't always give your kids what they want or what makes them happy. You know, we want fun family experiences, but you want those experiences, you know, that will help others and that will build into their lives, you know, for the future. You know, good, solid. Yeah.
You know, you said something, you said a lot of times you have to have those conversations and those talks. You know, a lot of times people in the church, you know, we just like to throw a couple scriptures on our problem and hopefully that it'll go away. You said there are times that you may have to talk about what if Matt's not here a year from now? How's it going to affect the kids? How important is it to be real? And when we are, what happens to us when we're real with God?
Yeah. And you just,
is it okay?
Yeah, and you just said it, real with God. I mean, it needs to start there, or some of these other conversations, you kind of wonder,
wow, yeah.
how real are they?
Yeah.
The thing I'm continually learning in a greater way is that when I had my prayers met my confusion, something happened. I was able to give voice to what I was really feeling, to the one you would think that would be almost automatic, God. But when I began to actually speak it, God, I'm really fearful. Mm-hmm. God, I'm confused. God, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, you're really missing the boat here, God. Or you seem really distant right now.
Is that okay, though? Are we allowed to do that as
Yes.
believers?
As a matter of fact, the
Are
book
we
of...
having doubt and unbelief?
No, I don't. I'm sure there's doubts, and you read the book of Psalms, I mean, we're in good company. The psalmist over and over and over continually just literally wrestled. The prophet Habakkuk wrestled with God, and they gave voice to it. And God was okay with that. Matter of fact, it seemed to strengthen that intimacy as God walked them through that time. Most of the Psalms begin a lot of times with the struggle, but they end with, but my hope is in you, God. My trust is in your unfailing love. It seemed like God walked them through the time and got them to a different perspective that they wouldn't have got to if they hadn't walked through it. One of the verses that has really remained in my mind is Psalm 119:71. The psalmist writes, "It was good for me to be afflicted, so I learned your ways."
Wow.
And it would strike me that the psalmist understood that without the affliction, there wouldn't be the learning. And so the affliction in that sense becomes a great treasure of us learning things about God we wouldn't have without it. And so my mind, the Holy Spirit's brought my mind back to that psalm quite often as we've gone through this, and still does.
Well, I'm sure there's many people that are watching right now that are battling through a trial, battling through a tribulation, have uncertainties. I just want both of you to take a minute. I'm going to start with you, Cyndy. What would you share with them? If someone's in the middle of something right now, they don't have a definite, they got a bad prognosis from the doctor. What do you tell them? How do they maintain their joy in their journey?
Well, one of the things that I mentioned in the book is at one time when Matt was really going through a bad summer of chemotherapy and stuff, I mean, and everything that goes on, you know, day to day with the kids, things got kind of tense, and we, you know, and that's when, you know, stuff can break down. And I actually got mad about something, and you know, didn't talk to him for quite a while. And I mean, don't let all those things, you know, come between you and your spouse. I mean, and you know, and granted, there's going to be a day where you're a little short or something, but you know, don't let that come between you, especially during those times. I mean, that's when you really need your spouse. And the other thing is, you know, don't sweat the small stuff. You know,
Come on.
You see, you know, people getting hung up on so many little things these days, and it's like, you know, part of me thinks, oh, you know, come on, get a real problem. You know, you have no idea. Right, you have no idea what could be going on, and you know, I don't want to say it's a good thing, but yeah, maybe it's a good thing about having something so big. You don't, you know, that little stuff, you know, that's, you know, God's, you know, bigger than that, and yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, I would just strongly encourage someone and maybe it would seem almost mechanical to them, But sit down with God and give voice to it. God's near the brokenhearted.
Amen.
And sometimes it's giving voice to the real struggle, the real challenge. It's not until we do that that God gives us what is, I'm learning, is the greatest miracle of all, a peace that we're told passes our ability to even understand it. And it's in those moments where you can give voice to your challenge, to your trial, to whatever it would be.
Yeah.
Give voice to it. And you need to believe that God is going to give you a peace. And it really, really starts there. And if I could add a couple other things, I would add, don't try to do it alone. God's given people in your life, your spouse, your children, your friends, your church. And if you're not part of a church, find a Bible-believing church that they'll come around you. It's one of the great gifts that Jesus gives us, is to be part of his people.
Amen.
There's great support there, great support that we have found from our church family back in Cokato. But I would definitely start with God. Give voice to it.
I want to thank you, Matthew and Cyndy, for coming and sharing with us and being vulnerable and open and just speaking encouragement, and I love the fact I never would have known that you're going through a trial unless I would have known about it. And so it's a testament of how God has kept you and continues to keep you. So would you join us at the end to pray for our viewers?
Oh,
would you both do